Joining us right now is the Executive Director for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jordan Sekulow. Jordan, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria.
So tell us how you see it. Explain this. The ACLJ just filed a brief in this case as well.
Right.
Why? Tell us about the brief and what are you expecting tonight?
Sure. Well, we believe, as the Trump administration does, that this is clearly within the presidential power to act, and not just based off broad constitutional Article II powers of the president, but actual statutory law passed by Congress going back to the 1950s and 60s in the Immigration and Nationality Act, which gives the president the ability to prohibit anyone who may be a detriment to the nation's security from entering the country. I mean, very clear language. And we're also looking at this extreme relief that was offered to Washington State, which has a whole issue about whether the state even has standing on its own to sue in this matter, and whether they met the standard of getting a temporary restraining order, which is to show irreparable harm to the state, and that they will likely win on the merits, when in fact in the district court judge's order for the temporary restraining order, there was little analysis of the actual law, both constitutional, Maria, and statutory. And that's why I think the Ninth Circuit decided not just to review this by paper. They could have just read the appeal and issued whether or not they would put a stay, which is what the Trump administration is requesting, on this temporary restraining order, which would then allow the executive order to go back into effect. Instead, because there was so, I think, little legal reasoning at the lower court level, they're doing this phone call hearing for an hour, which we're all going to be able to listen into if we want to at 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah.
Jordan, it's Dagan McDowell. All this panel, this Ninth Circuit panel, has to decide is whether the original judge in Seattle, Judge Robart, abused his discretion when he issued that order. This is a long legal road ahead for this travel ban, this travel order out of the White House. What kind of time frame are we really looking at before it's decided in the courts whether what President Trump did was legal?
Sure. Well, it's going to be quicker than most cases, Dagan, that usually a normal federal case could take, a year plus to make its way, if it even made its way all the way to the Supreme Court. But as you said, we're talking about an executive power, an act by the president. There are other lawsuits going on around the country. You're right that this lawsuit and the hearing today is just really on the temporary restraining order. It's not on the merits of the case. And here's what will happen. Here's kind of the two routes this can go. If Washington State prevails again today at the Ninth Circuit, they've got a three-judge panel. One is a Carter appointee, one is an Obama appointee, one is a George W. Bush appointee. If they prevail, the Trump administration can ask for en banc review by the Ninth Circuit. That means the entire Ninth Circuit. If that is denied by the Ninth Circuit, they can actually go to what's called the Circuit Justice. The Circuit Justice is the Supreme Court justice responsible for the Ninth Circuit, which is still the most overturned circuit in the country. That's Justice Kennedy. Now, he alone could issue a stay here in favor of the Trump administration. This could happen very quickly, within 24, 36 hours, if it has to go that route. He could also not answer, and he could refer the stay issue to the entire Supreme Court. So that's a fast track on just this procedural matter of the temporary restraining order. The actual merits portion of the case would continue on or not, regardless, and it would start back at the district court.
Tony, say it.
So, Jordan, we talk about a temporary restraining order, but the Trump administration points out this is a national injunction. This Seattle judge essentially has done something that impacts the national law. How strong is the legal case for him to do that, in your opinion?
It's interesting because a lot of people are pointing to what happened with President Obama's actions on immigration, the deferred action, DAPA and DACA, and a Texas district court judge that did similar action in the sense that it was universal jurisdiction, which district courts do have over the nation in certain areas of the law. When the president acts, also they can issue these kind of orders. He did that because it was clear that the state was facing a harm. Texas had to prove that they were facing a harm when they brought that, and their harm was the cost of the public school system and the issuing of driver's license. That's what got them over the hurdle. And the difference there was that President Obama was not acting on the side of the constitutional precedent or statutory precedent, but in opposite of what the law actually said. Here, it's difficult to see how Washington State itself, not some of the companies that it's saying it represents. That doesn't really matter. It's how this harms Washington State. And there's no legal right or constitutional rights for Washington State to benefit from people who are not in the country and are not U.S. citizens. They have no right in protecting them. So,
they just
again,
didn't
a
like
very
the law.
different case than what happened in Texas.
They didn't like the executive order. I mean, you know, we were with Buck Sexton yesterday, right?
That's right.
Formerly CIA.
And
he
enough for
basically
them,
said
Maria.
there's no legal backing
them.
here. There's no legal backing. It's just that they didn't like the order.
Loose interpretation.
And so they moved on it, Michael.
Loose interpretation. That's all this is. You know, why do we expect more from the Ninth Circuit? Let me throw this out there. Do we think the Trump administration wants us to go to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible?
You know, I think, honestly, they would rather have had this handled at the district court level, no temporary injunction, temporary restraining order issued. Ultimately, it may have made its way to the Supreme Court, but fast-tracking it like this while the Department of Justice is still coming together. I mean, we don't have an attorney general. We have an acting attorney general. We have an acting solicitor general. This is a tougher time. It doesn't mean that the people there are not completely qualified to do this, and it's also a questionable time at the court. Though I think this could be an opportunity where the presidential power lines are so clear that it could be 8-0. You've got this 4-4 split that would mean that you go back to these lower court decisions, and what happens today at the Ninth Circuit could hold up. So it would certainly probably be better for the Trump administration if there were a full court of 9 justices.
Yeah, let me ask you about the technology industry. I mean, obviously coming together all in one to oppose the president's travel restrictions. Companies are criticizing the extreme vetting, and they say that they're against it. They include Tesla, Apple, Google, non-tech firms like Kind, snack bars, Chobani yogurt. Do you think this opposition is going to make a big difference in court?
I think that does in Washington State. But the opposition, they didn't actually file the lawsuit, Maria. That's the difference, is that they are not the actual plaintiffs here. It's the state of Washington. And that is an argument that the Department of Justice will make today in the hearings, especially if the Attorney General of Washington continues to harp on that support. Just like how we filed an amicus brief, we are not the actual parties to this, so we don't have to show that harm. Microsoft, they can file their own lawsuits. They're not doing so here. It's the state who has to show the harm. It is the state who is against the federal government.
All right, we will leave it there. Jordan, great info. Thanks so much. We appreciate your time this morning. Jordan Sekulow there for more.